Hello and welcome to Connect, the weekly podcast for the California MBA, featuring one-on-one interviews with movers and shakers in the mortgage industry. I'm Susan Milazzo, CEO of the California MBA, and I'm very happy you could join us today. Before I get to today's guest, I'd like to thank the 2023 President's Council sponsors for the California MBA. These are companies that have given our association a tremendous amount of financial support, mostly to help support our continual efforts to be the strong voice for the California real estate finance industry before the California State Legislature and our regulators. So very grateful to these companies that provide that extra financing for our association in 2023. Those companies are AmeriHome, Arch MI, Consolidated Analytics, Funding Shield, Incelerate, Guild Mortgage, Rocket Mortgage, and Western Alliance Bank. Thank you all so much for your support for the California MBA. We really appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn to today's guest, one of our President's Council members. Welcome to Steve Kolker with AmeriHome. Steve, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I was happy that that you wanted to be a part of Connect. I love to always get started with the story about how you got into the mortgage business. So why don't you share with our listeners what your story is?
All right, so you got to be a little patient with this story because it goes way back.
Okay.
It goes back to 1980, believe it or not. So when I was in high school, I was a high school senior, and my dad had a mortgage company in the 70s and 80s, and he said, hey, if you're, he saw that I was starting to get out of school earlier and earlier, and said, hey, if you want a job, I need some help doing some loan servicing stuff. I just bought a computer, and I need someone to transfer all the data from ledger cards to the computer. So after school, I'd go over to his office. I was taking these ledger cards and putting all the data into a computer that was the size of a closet. And, to me, it was just, just an after school job. I never thought anything about it. I started doing some collection calls and things like that and helping him with some foreclosures. He was in the hard money business back in the late 70s. Anyways, that was just a job. I went to college, got a degree in the sciences. I was actually going to medical school, and that was my plan anyways. And I told my dad, I said, hey, I'd like to take a year off to travel before I go back to school for another 8 years. You okay with that? He said, absolutely. If you want to, do that, that's fine. Come, if you want to earn some money in the meantime, just come work in the office, answer phones, do whatever, and I'll pay you, and then you can travel and do your thing. Well, so this is summer of 85, and I'm applying to medical school, and it's all going fine. And then he splits up with his partner of 20-something years. And he says, hey, can you just come help me get a new company started? I just need to get regrouped, and I just need a couple months of your time. And he said, after that, then you can go do your thing and travel and do whatever. And so we did this. We put a couple ads in the newspaper. We got a new office. And all of a sudden, the phone started ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And I've been there ever since, basically. I was having so much fun. We were doing, he taught me how to do deals. I went and took loan applications. I went and signed loan documents. I drew loan documents. I did all the different pieces of the pie, of the puzzle anyways, in the late 80s, and then just kind of grew with it. And I had tried to tell the medical school that I got into that I wasn't coming, that I was gonna stay in the mortgage business. I was having too much fun, and at 22 years old, was making some pretty good money already, and I was like, okay, yeah. I think I like this.
Yeah.
And stuck, and here we are, almost 40 years later. Jeez, 40 years.
That is an incredible story. I didn't start. Literally, it's the only industry you've ever worked in, like from being a teenager.
For sure. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Remember those? I remember those computers that were the size of a closet.
Had a big giant disc that I had to take out every night, and
we got the amber screens. We were doing good because we didn't have the green screens anymore. We had the amber screens. That was like the big technology thing in the 80s, right? Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that. That's a fun story. 2023, is with its share of challenges this year. I think that it's one thing to be a leader when times are good, and it's different being a leader in this industry, especially when the market is more challenging. What can you share with some leadership values that can help companies navigate a year like 2023?
Yeah. Well, obviously I've seen a cycle or two, been through some pretty tough cycles and some pretty tough times personally, obviously through, 35 plus years in the business, having had my own company, had to close it, I've had to do layoffs and branch closures and all kinds of horrible things throughout the journey. But the one thing that's kind of stuck with me this whole time is building trust through transparency and integrity. And what I mean by that is really, when things are tough and you really don't want to tell people what's happening, that's the most important time to me to tell them what's happening. Because if you don't tell them what's happening, they'll create their own sense of reality and what they think is happening. And it's probably worse than what it actually is in your mind. And so, for me, it's just about leading with your heart, being honest to the extent, there's obviously certain things you just can't share as a leader because you may know too much, because you might scare people. But I think in general, the more you can share, the more you build trust, the more you become vulnerable to your team, and the more you're a servant leader and people will follow you. So I think that's kind of the way I would lead. That's how I lead and have led.
Then I absolutely agree with you. I think that communication and transparency, letting people know that, you are the leader, but you're sharing, like, this is the reality of what's happening, and it may or may not be as bad as, it's interpreted. I think that's great advice. Yeah. Leaders are having to take all the good advice they can get in a year like this, I think.
Yeah, it's just tough no matter which way you slice it. Having, you're probably experienced layoffs. If you're in the mortgage industry today, there's no way you haven't experienced reductions in force as a leader, having to tell people and soothe the ones that stay, right? They've got tremendous amount of anxiety.
Yeah.
The survivors, right? They've got survivor's guilt, survivor's anxiety. And you need to bring those people together and let them know what's happening and let them know why things have happened and how you're going to get out of it. What you see in the market and what your plan is.
What that path forward is. I agree with that. So we have, we've talked, you have had a long successful history in this business. What advice would you give somebody that's just starting out in the mortgage business?
Is that a trick question?
Do something else for a couple of years and then try it again?
We know this, and I've heard hundreds of people tell this story, right? But no one chooses it, right? It always chooses you, right? So I guess, if I found this unicorn that someone came out of college and said, I want to be in the mortgage business, right? And whether they were going to go into sales, they thought they wanted to be in sales, or they thought they wanted to be in operations, my advice would be do everything. Like find a company or a mentor or someone that will give you an opportunity to do everything, right? Do servicing, right? I mean, I started out doing collection calls and foreclosures. I went out and collected rent on properties we foreclosed on. I got a sense for the people that I was dealing with, and then learn how to take a complete loan application, right? All starts there, right? Whether you're in sales or you're a processor or an underwriter, complete loan application is everything. Process, learn how to underwrite. Even if you don't have to underwrite all the way, learn how to calculate income and assets at a baseline. Draw docs, fund loans. I even did escrows. So I mean, the more you do in the business before you land on what you are going to choose as your career, whether it's leadership or sales or whatever, having the baseline knowledge of all these different functions gives you a lot of power that most people don't have, because no one can ever fool you as to what's involved in the job, right? And so if I was managing a team that involved doc drawing and someone said, oh, it takes me too long to do this or that, I was like, I've done this a few times and I don't think so, right? You can call them out. And so I just think it gives you a little bit more knowledge and background to navigate if you know all the different roles.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going into sales.
Yeah.
Right. Then it gives you that knowledge background to be able to communicate to your client, whether it be a mortgage broker if you're a wholesaler, or to a borrower themselves. if you're on the retail side as a loan officer.
Yeah, I think that that's great advice. Just getting, as much experience in all the aspects of the life cycle of a loan will really give you that well-rounded experience or background to further your career. Find out where you want the niche.
Yeah.
Where you want
Even
to
here at AmeriHome, we have a leadership training program. So just kind of like what you described. Someone's coming out of college, someone's starting their career as a professional. We put them through, it's correspondent, so they're not really getting the full mortgage experience, but from a correspondent perspective, we're training them to be leaders. And so we put them in our loan purchase review, we put them in condition review, we put them in service, and we just move them around the company in 6-month blocks to expose them to the different components. And then we can put them in a management position when that opens up for them.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I do know. I've actually, I think I ended up helping somebody get into AmeriHome's management program, and they're very grateful. They had a wonderful experience with that.
Yeah.
I know that you are also a member of the Mortgage Action Alliance, or MA. For those that are listening that don't know what that is, that's the grassroots advocacy platform that's powered by the National MBA that we use in the industry to take positions on very problematic pieces of legislation, both at the federal level and in the states. We've used it in the California MBA to be incredibly, we don't use it a lot. We like to be very sparing with it so that's impactful. But it is a very valuable resource for us to use in our advocacy programs when a bill gets to the point where it's at the floor, it's being voted on, and it has the potential to pass if it's something that we don't want to see happen. So I know that you're a member of Mortgage Action Alliance. Can you share with our listeners the importance of joining, which is free, by the way, and nonpartisan, so anybody can join?
Right. So this is something that was probably lost on me when I was younger, and probably a lot of people it's lost on, but it's easy as individuals for us to think, well, someone else has got this, right? Someone else is handling it. Oh, the Mortgage Bankers Association, they're working on it. But ultimately, if we all think like that, no one will do it. It's not going to get done, right? And so in the last 10 to 15 years, probably for me, I've gotten more involved, and it's just become that much more obvious to me how political the mortgage business has become, as advocacy, probably has peaked for us in the last 15, 20 years with Dodd-Frank and with the Taylor reform and all the different things that have happened to us in the last 15, 20 years since 2010 reform, really. And just even in the last couple of years, how it's kind of exploded. We have to be involved. And the more numbers we have from membership, the more powerful we become as a group. I mean, honestly, I think I was probably, not as good as I should have been until more recently. I've gotten a lot more involved. And working with the MAA, and we've had some events in DC recently with our clients and with members of the House and things like that. And I think, for me, the best example that I can have, and everybody should be familiar with this now, is Bob Brecksmith, Pete Mills, and the whole team at the MBA, how they pushed the FHFA on this debt ratio LLPA issue.
Yes.
Guarantee you that if it wasn't for them, everyone in the business would be figuring how to implement that right now. There's no question if they were responsible for getting this done. And so I'm really proud to be a member of that, and would encourage anyone in this industry, from even if you're not in leadership, just if you're a processor, be part of it. Have your voice heard.
Strength in numbers. I will say it is very effective. Like I say, we have made we've made big impact on problematic legislation here in California using it. So thank you. And you being a leader in the industry and encouraging others to do it, that is the way that the newer entrants into the market, or maybe people like you say haven't paid attention to that, they'll be compelled to be a part of the industry in making sure that good policy is passed. So thank you for that.
Don't assume that others are going to get it done.
Yes, that's for sure. That's for sure. I believe that when you are not at work, over the past few decades, you have spent a lot of time on the baseball field as a Little League coach. So I'm saying we all got involved in Little League, I think, at some point from our kids, but you were a coach for quite some time. You tell us what was that experience like?
So for me, I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl. They were all involved in youth sports, and they played every sport. We exposed them to where we could. And I grew up on sports. I'm a huge sports fan. I played college sports. I mean, I've been involved in around, but I just love being with the kids. Nothing gave me more joy than having a bunch of 5-year-olds t-ball, run around, have fun, goof off, learn a little, and have fun. But I coached hockey, I coached soccer, and I coached Little League. But I coached Little League for about 22 years. I just recently stopped as my oldest kid was done and left for college. But my boys are 11 years apart. So when one finished the program, the other one was starting t-ball. So I had two full cycles. I swear I now miss the smell of the French fries at the Little League on Saturdays. But it was just, for me, again, being in a place where I could coach kids and have an influence on, not only their ability to have fun and play a sport, but, as the kids got older, as they were 12, 13, and 14, that was when they really started becoming, young adults and athletes and people, and just helping them through challenging times. Not all the kids were, on equal footing, and you just, be a friend to them and be a coach to them. It was just really rewarding.
I applaud you for doing that. I'm a huge fan of Little League. I remember when my son, was his last year, and I was like, I think I was more sad than he was. I'm like, what? I can't do this anymore. I feel like I'm just a adult that comes and watches games anyway.
I'm sure of that. I was throwing batting practice till my son was 18. So.
Yeah, I mean,
not that long ago. I just recently retired from the baseball field.
Well, good for you, because those programs need good people like you to volunteer. So good for you that you've spent your time doing that. Steve, you and AmeriHome in particular have been huge supporters of the California MBA. Of course, again, President's Council sponsor for several years now, which we greatly appreciate. Can you share with our listeners why you feel it's important to support our organization?
Absolutely. So again, it's similar to the National MBA and the MAA. The CMBA is in our backyard, right? We're a California-based company, and I think the strength in numbers. We've been a huge supporter of the CMBA, and I'm on the board, and I really enjoy it. Listen, I enjoy the networking opportunity. I enjoy the exposure. And I just really admire yourself, how involved you've been and driven this organization. But again, it's one of those things that if you don't get involved, nobody will get involved. And so just by example, being part of it to argue, in the California legislature for issues that impact us. And so again, I just think it's important to have a voice and to make sure our voice is heard, on top of the multitude of opportunities that CMBA offers for learning and networking. Future Leaders, great example, right? We've been a big supporter of that program. We probably put 2 people through that program every year. They're all still with us. They're our rising stars in our company. And you just see a huge change in their knowledge base and their skill sets as they go through that leadership program, the Future Leaders program. So huge fan, huge supporter, and just love what CMBA has done for AmeriHome and for the industry. So again, same thing as the MBA, you got to be involved in both, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that, and you're right. If everybody would support the national MBA and the states in which they lend, we can be sure that we'd all be very strong for that. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Thanks so much for being on Connect. This has been fun.
Great, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And thanks to all of you for joining us on today's episode. To access any of our past episodes, you can follow us on our YouTube channel. We're also available on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. That's it for this week, and we'll see you next time on Connect.